back. We're live streaming. So now we're starting. Good evening and welcome to Book Passage. My name is Allison Bainbridge. Thank you to both our audience who's here live and those of you watching virtually for joining us in celebration of Penn Jillette's new book, Felony Juggler. As I'm sure most of you know who are watching, Penn is a cultural phenomenon as a solo personality and as half the world famous Emmy Award winning magic duo Penn and Teller. He's also a prolific author of numerous books. He's hilarious, he's brilliant. No one person should be so talented and have so much, is all I have to say. In the back earlier, he was just making us laugh so hard. It was wonderful. He's here tonight to talk about his third novel and to do a little juggling. Felony Juggler is about a street performer who finds himself enmeshed in a crime and must outwit his fellow conspirators in his greatest juggling act yet. You'll never look at a street performer the same way again. He draws from his own youthful experience as a nomadic juggler before earning international acclaim. His madcap thriller is an authentic and often hilarious glimpse into the pleasures and perils of performing on the street. TV host Lawrence O'Donnell, who happens to be a good friend of Penn's, writes of the book, "If you think street performing isn't fun and robbing and bank robbery is fun, or that you know how the Rolling Stones make money, you've got a lot to learn." And it's all in Penn's Can't Put It Down, Page Turner, Felony Juggler, where you'll discover that everything is juggling. We are in times right now where we all require moments of lightness, laughter, magic, whatever it takes to distract us from what is going on. And you are in for one of those moments, or about 55 moments. And it is with great joy and anticipation that I present Penn Jillette.
Hello. I know. Calm down about the microphone. It's okay. They told me we're streaming, so you got to use a microphone. And you're getting very nervous, aren't you, that I wasn't going to use the microphone? Okay, so now I'm using the microphone. You happy? I'm even going to use the microphone when I juggle, if I juggle. This does this. Does it go high enough for me? Oh, wonderful. Hi, everybody. My name is Penn Jillette, and uh, the name of the book is Felony Juggler, and if people have heard of me, they've probably heard of me as a magician, and that was never a goal of mine, and I never particularly liked magic. And if you were to wake me up, in the middle of the night, please don't. I would I would probably, the list of things I consider myself to be, magic would be very far down on the list. I've ended up earning my living that way for 50 years. We've had a great deal of luck with magic, but that's not where I started out. Steve Martin once said that if you desperately wanted to be in show business, no talent, you become a magician. And I believe that's true. It's certainly true for all that I've met. And but there is a step down from there, which is juggler. Because juggler even takes away the slight gloss of performing that's there with magic. And I was from a small town. I'd never met anybody in show business. The first person I met in show business was me. I was the first person I ever met that did a show. And I wanted desperately, my passion was to be a musician. I wanted to be Bob Dylan. I'm still not. And that's all I wanted was to be Bob Dylan, or maybe Frank Zappa. Maybe if I leaned a little bit toward comedy, Martin Mull. But I didn't really have any other interest in art at all except music, and I didn't have the talent. If you're going to be successful in any field, I think you have to at least be the best person in your high school. And I didn't have really good pitch. I had a passion for music, but there were people that could learn songs from listening to them once on the radio on guitar, and I couldn't do that. And there were people who were better at drumming in my high school, and so I really looked at the hand I was dealt and saw that I not only was I not musically talented enough, but also there are people that have huge success with music. At the time I was young, that were having huge success in music without any talent, but I wasn't as good looking as Jim Morrison. Um, so I just thought, and this is just based on ignorance, I thought that if I just practiced juggling all the time, that I would be good enough, and someone would come and say, "You're a really good juggler. Now you can be in show business." Because although I really didn't have anything that I can label as talent, I've always been able to practice. I can practice forever, anything. I can learn anything that takes just tenacity. And when I started to juggle when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, I would juggle, 8 hours a day while going to school. While I didn't really go to school, but you know what I mean. While being enrolled in school, I juggled 8 hours a day and just practiced all the time. And I learned with a guy named Mike Motion, who was my next door neighbor. In the book, he's referred to by some other name, I think Adam or something. Um, but Mike Motion was my neighbor, and although Mike Motion won the MacArthur Genius Grant, the only juggler to ever get it, and let's keep it that way, um, he was quite the juggler. And Motion, by the way, is his real name, Mike Motion, and he was a juggler. Um, and he will not admit this. He still denies it. It still pisses him off. But I taught him to juggle. I learned a day before he did. And he was my next door neighbor and best friend. And he and his brother Colin and I all learned to juggle together. And we had a little group called the Toss Ups. And the first joke we had was, "Hello, we're the Toss Ups. We're going to call ourselves the Throw Ups," but we weren't getting booked. Maybe the first joke I ever did on stage was that joke there. And the truth is that magic and juggling are often put together because they're the bottom of show business, right? I mean, it's jugglers, magicians, and mimes and ventriloquists, origami maybe, but the absolute bottom of show business. So people think that it's a similar form, but it's actually diametrically opposed. When a magician says they're going to do something, the whole joy is knowing that they're not really going to do that. And when a juggler says he's going to do something, he does it. And there's no surprise, they just juggle. And I never liked magicians for that very reason. I never liked the fact that they were always lying. And more importantly, I never liked the fact that they were on. I'm old enough. I'm 70 years old, so I'm old enough that I could see the very end of Ed Sullivan and kind of the Hollywood Palace at that time, and they would have bands that I wanted to see on there. They'd be like the Who and Zeppelin and bands I really wanted to see, and then there'd be some dipshit magician on there before that. As I've said a million times, some greasy guy in a tux with a lot of birds torturing women in front of Mylar to bad small dick white boy rip off Motown music, and which is the way, by the way, magic continues. Most magicians have the same story. They were usually sickly as a child. Teller's in the hospital with some weird heart thing when he was 5, and I think Copperfield was sick, and Siegfried and Roy were upset about losing the Second World War, and they all had these things that they wanted to get over, and somebody gave them, a magic book, and Teller will just get all teary-eyed talking about what it meant to him to have these magic props. And then almost all magicians were very, very full of hate in high school. And wanted to have things over on other people. They weren't dating, and they were not having friends. So it was like, as Jerry Seinfeld has said about every magic act, it's here's a quarter, now it's gone, you're a jerk, now it's back, you're an asshole, show's over. Um, and there are also people like Kreskin, who after all these years, I still hate, even though he's dead. Um, And he went on TV and claimed to be doing ESP, and he was actually doing tricks, and I didn't know that. And when I was, I guess, 11 or 12, he was on some talk show, not Carson, because Carson, like me, hated him. But he was on some talk show, and he was doing an experiment, and I was really into science at that point. I really loved it, my favorite subject at school. And he had a scientific experiment that was talking about this new science of ESP. So I watched that and loved it and thought, wow, this is a great branch of science. And then my parents, who were not wealthy, I'm from a dead factory town in Western Massachusetts, and my dad was a jail guard. And they bought me this bullshit ESP kit where I could do my science. And then for those of you who are still hip to the Dewey Decimal System, you probably know that magic and juggling are very close together on the racks because they're both garbage arts. And I spent a lot of my time growing up in the Greenfield Public Library. And so I happened to stumble upon a book by Dunninger next to the one book they had on juggling, which was Three Ball Juggling by Ken Benj. And right next to it was a book about Dunninger, who was a mentalist, which is what ESP people were called, still are. And I happened to thumb through it. And the way I remember it, which probably can't be true because it probably took longer than this, but my memory of it is that I opened the book and saw the trick that Kreskin had done. In reality, what probably happened was I opened the book and saw that those kinds of things could be done by trickery. And I had a reaction that only a 11 or 12-year-old can have, which is very, very dramatic. I thought that since Kreskin had lied about science, that scientists were all liars, and I hated them. And my grades went, this is actually true, my grades went from straight A's to failing everything. I would not go back to science class. I just thought, why do I want to be lied to by adults? And I hated magic. And here it was getting in the way of me seeing rock and roll bands, and they were lying to children. There was just nothing good about magicians. I continue to believe that. And when people usually talk about magic, they talk about it being wish fulfillment, which is insane. If your wish is to dismember women, you should be locked the fuck up. No one has ever wished to be able to find one piece of cardboard among 52 very similar looking pieces of cardboard. How is that wish fulfillment? And they also will talk about how it's fantasy, magicians saying, I had a dream about this. It's just all total bullshit. I mean, magic at its best is playful epistemology, right? It's how we determine what's true, how we determine how we learn things. And I hated magic, and I was a juggler. By the way, also the type of person. I mean, stereotypes we always have to be careful of, but magicians are all sneaky, antisocial, and unpleasant, and jugglers are all really happy losers. And any juggler you meet will invite you to a barbecue, introduce you to his family, and will tell you the truth about everything. Every magician will try to be mysterious, and he's just a dipshit. But I met Teller, and I met Amazing Randy. And Teller said to me an incredible thing. Teller said that magic was essentially intellectual. And that sounds like the most insane thing you could say because it's done by stupid people. But the fact is that music is primal, and it's visceral, and it's sexual, and your foot taps automatically and your body moves to it automatically. But and poetry even has that kind of, it's about love and it's about power. And magic, you have to know all the rules of the world before you can enjoy anything in magic. If you show magic to very young children who are learning about how the way the world works, they just go, oh, that's the way the world works. There's nothing there. And Teller taught me that it was essentially intellectual. And Randy taught me that you could, Amazing Randy, for those who don't know, was a big skeptic and one of the most important people in my life. And he did a lot of Well, he was the side of magic that says magic is tricks as opposed to magic is what. But anyway, um, Randy said that you could do magic and be honest. And I set out with Teller to find how we could do a magic show that that was honest from beginning to end, and that dealt with actual ideas, was not antisocial, was not, with the exception of Van Halen, very few guitar players ever came out and said, "Oh, I can do this and you can't." Yeah, and it's a shared experience you want from art, and magic often puts that wall up of "I can do this and you can't." So Teller and I wanted to do all of that, and if I brought anything to magic, it's the fact that I didn't really think about magic seriously until I was 20. And that's a big important gap. Everybody else starts, five to 10 years old being fascinated by magic, and a 20-year-old sees a little bit different about the world. So the show, the book is called Felony Juggler because it's about the time in my life when I really was a full-time juggler. When they wanted me to juggle a little bit, and it's going to be really hard because I'm going to do it with the microphone around me. And I'm not very good anymore either. But I practiced all the time. Can I do it like this? I think this might be impossible, but I'll try. I learned to juggle. I practiced. Oh, see, I can't do it with the fucking microphone. I mean, you wanted me to be on mic, right? Oh, as long as I project my voice, now I have no excuse. See, now when I put it down here, now when I miss, there's no reason for it. But what I wanted to do was when I first did juggling shows with Mike Motion and Colin Motion in junior high and high school. We worked, nursing homes and talent shows, and made $5 at a pop or so. Um, I would do like a 1 minute introduction, and then we would juggle for 20 minutes, and we had an elaborate routine. We passed clubs. I mean, Mike Motion and I were very good for 1973. I believe we were the first people in the world to pass 9 clubs. Two people with what you would think of as bowling pins, throwing them between us. Almost everybody does 6. We learned to do 9. Um, the internet, it seems, accomplished 2 things. It gave us all pornography and also made really good jugglers. Uh, Children now, 14 years old, are doing 12 clubs among 2 of them. Juggling just left me totally behind. Not only out of practice and haven't juggled for a long time, but if I was at my absolute peak, which I was at about 19 years old, I wouldn't be as good as, I don't know, 500 12-year-old jugglers today. The abilities have gotten incredible. Part of the reason, I don't think this is interesting to anybody, but it fascinates me. Part of the reason that juggling got better is you don't have to see how to do something once you know it's possible. And that is an astonishingly important thing. With mathematical proofs, someone would announce that they were going to deliver a mathematical proof at a conference or something. And then very often, a month before, someone else would come out with the proof. And people would think that it had been stolen or there'd been a leak somewhere. And it just turned out that once you say, "I've solved this math problem," other people can do it. And once we said you can do 9 clubs, other people started doing it. So juggling's a lot better now. But at the time I was pretty good. And I would talk for a minute or 2 and then juggle for 20. And then as went on, I started talking for 5 minutes and juggling for 15. And by the time we got to Broadway, I was talking for 15 and juggling for 30 seconds in that routine. And I found that the more I talked and the less I juggled, the more success I had. I had no idea how to get into a circus. I had no idea how to do anything. So I just started hitchhiking from Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I lived, I'm going to talk about this when I read the excerpt from the book, but I lived on the streets. Now, you'll notice I'm very careful in the book to not ever use the word homeless, because although I had no place to live and I was sleeping rough and I was hopping trains and I was hitchhiking, um, I had parents that were very supportive of me. I could have at any second gone back and lived there very happily. I, astonishingly, for someone who would be considered a runaway hippie, I, I called my mom and dad every day from all over the country. And I was hopping trains and I was living like that and juggling on the street, but I was not in distress. As a matter of fact, very shortly after about a year of living on the streets, I was making phenomenal money. I wasn't living anywhere, but I was juggling and making all this money in cash. And I was doing very, very well and very happy, and, would have continued to live like that had I not, completely blown out my voice. And any skills that I have were all based on when you're on the street performing, anybody can walk away really easily. So you learn a lot of stuff to keep them around. And I also would go in, I don't even know why I would do this, but I would go into like bars that I couldn't even be in because I wasn't 21. And I would say, can I open for the band tonight? And I would talk my way into doing that. And I would go on stage at, biker bars before heavy metal bands, and I would do my 15-minute juggling act and be booed and hated, and kept doing that, until I got kind of better. So I would tell these stories about my time on the streets, just living on the streets in America for, I guess it was 2.5 years, maybe 3. I took time out in the middle of that to go to Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Greatest Show on Earth Clown College. And then right after that, I started working with Teller. And I would tell these stories to my friends, and they would like them. And many people said, you should write a book about this. And I felt really uncomfortable. An autobiography seemed really creepy to me. So I added a bank robbery and a murder and called it a novel. But everything in the book is, when you say true, of course, there's a great thing. Ian Dury, the great singer-songwriter, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. They did a documentary on him, a biopic is what I guess my children say biopic, but I guess biopic is also correct, about him. And they asked his son if the movie was accurate to his father's life, and he said, well, if we're accurate, it would have to be 57 years long. And that's true. So I've pulled out the stories, and they are the best that I remember them. They are, I think, at least by today's definition, they're truer than most things. But I tell all these stories, and if you happen to read the book, which I think there's probably a higher probability in this crowd than most places, if you happen to read the book, I will tell you that every bit of it, as far as I remember, is completely true up until the end of the Burger King scene. Now, many of you are going to think when you're reading it that the beginning of the Burger King scene is where it goes to bullshit. But the fact is, it's the end. I was invited to take place in a very bad criminal activity, and the character in the book, who's named Poe, decides to say yes, and the character standing here, Penn, decided to say no. And I've always just kind of wondered what would have happened if I decided to not only do illegal street performing, but also illegal bank robbery. And that's what this book is about. And also interweaved in there is all my experiences at the Renaissance festivals, which is also completely true. Teller and I did our first show together at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, and that was 50 years ago. And Teller and I are actually going back August, what date, Glenn? 19th? 16th. August 16th, we're going back to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, and 50 years later are going to be performing there. And yes, motherfucker, we will be wearing tights, so fuck yourself. No, we are going to be wearing the costumes we wore then and not the 3-piece suits. So I think I'm supposed to read an excerpt from the book. Is that what Glenn's giving me the signal for? So I'm gonna read a little bit of it. I'm gonna read a little bit now, and then I'll take questions. And I'll also say, my friend Eddie Gorodetsky, who is certainly in the running for the funniest man in the world, um, he did an interview with us at Comic Con about 50 years of Penn and Teller, and his opening question or his opening statement. Um, which he ended up not doing, but I thought it was so funny. He said to the audience there at Comic Con, "How many of you have heard Teller speak? And now, how many of you have heard Penn give a concise answer to anything?" So with that in mind, I will take questions after, but for right now, I'll read a little bit of the book. Is that right? Oh, okay. The one that says Felony Juggler? Groovy. I'm going to sit down for this. And am I doing a good job with the mic? No problem at all, right? I wish I had my acoustic guitar. I'm going to just read the first chapter. Does that sound good? Is that right, Glenn? For whole first chapter? Or did you want me to stop soon? I know I'll read the first chapter. If you start not liking it, just let me know. We'll go to questions. I don't care. Um, Felony Juggler, Chapter 1. There were two things I wanted in high school. I wanted to be Jewish and I wanted to be gay. I listened to Lenny Bruce and he talked about the Goyim, and that was me. In Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee says to John Savage with disdain, "Go back to Massachusetts." I wasn't from smart Massachusetts like Cambridge. I wasn't even from dumb, tough Massachusetts like Dorchester or Revere. I was from the part of Massachusetts that doesn't matter to anyone. The Massachusetts that no one even thinks about. People kind of know the Western Mass of Tanglewood, Amherst, the five colleges, the Arlo Guthrie stuff, but they didn't even know Greenfield, Massachusetts existed until Anthony Bourdain talked about the opioid capital of New England, and that was decades later. It's now the fentanyl capital of New England. But back when I was a teenager, it wasn't even that. As the 70s started, Greenfield was a combination of hippie and redneck, like a lot of America. There were flannel shirts and gun racks, hunting, fishing, and the Brotherhood of the Spirit, huge hippie commune with rich kids like Walter Cronkite's daughter giving money to a spiritual, sexual ex-con, Michael Rapunzel Metallica. School was awful. All the acid heads getting teaching degrees at the University of Massachusetts would try out their open campus, free school, theoretical techniques in our dead factory town. So our Greenfield High was experimental nothing. No real classes, no nothing. Even more of a waste of time than every other high school. I had good SATs, crazy good. I had a free ride to any college, but didn't want to go. I gave a different reason every time I was asked, but I've never done drugs or had a drink, and college seemed like just drugs and alcohol, and I didn't want it. I was already getting laid, so I didn't need it. I skipped most of all my classes in my senior year of high school to drive the million miles to Amherst in 25 minutes and sit in on classes there. I was 6'7" with hair down to the middle of my back, certainly college material. But it didn't seem like college was hard enough or interesting enough. Of course, if I had MIT or Harvard to kick my ass, it might have been different, but things are never different. Things are what they are. I was a Greenfield goy, and there was no way out of it. I was big, dumb, full of cum, with a little nose, and I liked pussy. Dull. I read Steal This Book, Revolution for the Hell of It, Woodstock Nation, and the East Village Other. I memorized Lenny Bruce, I listened to Bette Midler, and I thought a lot about sucking cock, but mostly as an intellectual exercise. I was really fucking lots in high school and very happy with that, but it was all women. Anal sex was birth control, and the anal sex was with women. I was smart enough to fuck smart girls, so Henry Miller did all the hard seduction work, and I just showed up with a cock, a rebellious attitude, and long hair, and I was in. I wasn't even out of school when I took my first long hitchhiking trip. It was around March, around spring break. My best friend in high school, Larberg, was a year older, and he'd graduated from Greenfield High and moved to Chicago to go to college. Rather, he'd moved to Antioch to go to college in Ohio. But Antioch was such a hippie college that you didn't even go there. You went there, then they sent you on a work study to Chicago. I don't know how the fuck college works. I decided to hitch out to Chicago to visit Larberg. I convinced my high school juggling partner, Adam, actually Mike Motion, to come with me. That wasn't hard. I still don't know how we got our parents to go for it. No idea. I don't even remember having to try. We took a trip up to LL Bean in Maine and bought good backpacks. I got a passport so I'd have good ID for the police. I sewed $100 into the lining of my backpack. That $100 might still be there in the probably rotted knapsack in the attic above the garage, along with the notarized note from my mom and dad stating that I wasn't a runaway. Mom and Dad drove me to the Rotary at Route 91 and the Mohawk Trail, right at the Howard Johnson's where I'd wash dishes. By the time we'd swung around to the other side of the restaurant, we'd gotten our first ride, and we were off to Chicago. How did they let us do that? Times were different. We know that statistically things were more dangerous back then, but they seemed safer, maybe because there was less news, maybe because there were fewer movies made at that time. I don't know. No one hitchhikes anymore, but hitchhiking is so healthy. You meet people and you save gas. But we're all more scared of each other now than we were then. People hated hippies, though they didn't mind letting them into their cars for a while. There was no GPS. Instead, we had maps that our parents got from the American Automobile Association, but we couldn't read them. People say the GPS has ruined people's ability to read maps and navigate. Maybe it did that for you, but for me, until GPS came along, I never knew where I was. I never learned to read a map. I wasn't a proper subject in high school. Neither was balancing a checkbook for that matter. How hard could it be to get to Chicago? It was the next city over, right? If you were going somewhere and it wasn't to Boston, we had to be going to Chicago. It was just the other way, like Montreal. The first couple rides took us to Montreal. It seemed on the way. Chicago was cold. Montreal was cold. Who cares? By evening, late evening on the first day of hitchhiking, we were in Montreal. We'd gotten rides from college students leaving UMass for spring break. These students were too stupid to go to Florida. We had all just been declared 1H in the draft. We were essentially on hold, and with war, hold is a very good place to be. Vietnam wasn't going to draft us, so getting into Canada was not an issue. We crossed the border without incident. There we were, somewhere in Montreal. Adam and I were at some interchange. It was outside a toll booth or something. The police wouldn't let us near anywhere warm. We were singing Paul Simon, Detroit, Detroit, got a hell of a hockey team, repeatedly, and we were freezing. We were going to freeze to death. That's where the story could have ended, leaving no one left to tell the tale. It was cold, militarized cold. If you're in Massachusetts, why do you hitchhike north? Why would a couple fellows do that? I remember distinctly that we couldn't get a ride out of Montreal because someone had picked up a couple of hitchhikers in Montreal just the night before, and those hitchhikers had raped and murdered them. We were hitchhiking in Montreal, and a hitchhiking murderer and rapist was all over the news. That's why we weren't getting picked up. I remember it so clearly that it must not have been true. How would we have known that? We didn't have a radio. We didn't buy a newspaper. Would someone have stopped to tell us that? Who pulls over to say, hey, someone like you raped and killed someone, so no one's going to pick you up. Sorry. We must have made that up. It was drizzling. It was so fucking cold. There was still snow and slush all over. It was not Florida spring break, that's for sure. It was a wet t-shirt contest, all right, but no one was cheering, and the prize was staying alive. You like my nipples rock hard? Well, you should have been there. I had on my yellow work boots with little psychedelic paisleys that my girlfriend had painted all over them, and they were covered with salt and slush and soaking through the waterproofing. The hems of my yellow elephant bell bottoms were frozen stiff like the Liberty Bell, crack and all. The parts of my hair that weren't frozen were pushed down under my hat, trying for insulation. Someone has to pick us up, right? Adam forced out between frozen, clenched teeth. Why? Why? If one person can go by, another can go by. If one person doesn't have to pick us up, no one has to. If you flip a coin 1,000,000 times heads, it can come up heads again. At that point, maybe it's two-headed. Maybe the next car that comes by has the same reason not to pick us up as the last car. Maybe that's when we made up the rapist story and then believed it. Across a snowy field, there was a slow train, a really slow train, just barely moving. The snow was about a foot deep and there was a fence, but we could get to the train. Let's go hop that train, I said. Do you know how to hop a train? I think you just jump onto it, right? I mean, you hop on. We don't know how. If we stay here, we freeze to death. The train at least gets us out of here. We freeze to death somewhere else. Running across a field with a backpack and frozen feet is not easy. We were not the first teenagers to do it, and no one was shooting at us. We got over the barbed wire with a few small cuts on our hands and legs and ran. Suddenly we were close to the train. Now a slow-moving train is still a moving train. And slow moving for a train is not slow moving even when you're sprinting next to it. We could keep up with it, but not for long. So while running alongside the train, I reached out for the ladder between two cars. I was wearing gloves, but they were soaked through, partially frozen, and there was blood inside from the barbed wire cuts. I pulled my jacket down over my hands and lunged for the ladder. It almost pulled my arms out of their sockets. The train did not slow down with my weight. I was a tick on the deer's ass. Adam was still running beside the train. Get on, asshole! Grab on! Just grab on! I was screaming. Let go! Just get off! I could just barely hear him, the sound eaten up by the speed, the cold, and the dark. No! Join me! Jump on now! I'm really screaming. I didn't want to be leaving Montreal alone. I also didn't want to leave Montreal with Adam. I didn't want to be in Montreal alone. I didn't want to be in Montreal with Adam. I wanted to be somewhere warm and dry, with or without Adam. Who cares? Adam finally hopped on, but a bunch of cars behind me. Neither one of us really on the train. We're both holding on by our hands with our legs dangling behind us, trying to get them on the ladder. We finally did that. Now what? The train sped up as we held desperately onto freezing ladders, moving into the dark, going faster and faster. It was now a speeding train, away from the intersection lights of Montreal in no time. It was dark. Just train lights and houses in the distance. I couldn't really even see Adam. There was enough wind that it would have been impossible to talk anyway. All we could do was hold on to freezing, speeding ladders that we couldn't see. I was so tired and cold and wet. If I didn't move, I'd just hang there until I froze or fell asleep or dropped into the snow and died. Just a piss hole in a Canadian snowbank. This had gone from a tender goodbye from Mom and Dad at the Mohawk Trail Rotary to disaster in just under 12 hours. I decided I had to get to Adam. I can't remember how I did it. I don't think it was possible to walk between the cars. It was all freight. There were no passengers, none. But it doesn't seem that I could have climbed along the top of the car. Was I that James Bond in the snow and ice? I got back to him, but I really can't piece together how I did it. I couldn't have just Spider-Maned across the side of the car, so I must have got on top and crawled. Now we were together. Would we just stay there until we fell off together and died? We decided to move toward the front of the train. I guess we had to. I think we were crawling on top for like a half hour. We were so cold, it was so dark, and there were several engines. We got into one of the front engines and crawled down the frozen ladder to the door. The door was unlocked, and it was warm in there. It was just a big, warm room with big, loud engines all around and no people. We opened that door, and the warm just hit us like an illegal paradise, industrial warm, like dangerous warm. I had prayed for warm, and it was going to hit me like a flaming monkey's paw. Are we going to get arrested? Shot? Adam's fear had thawed out quickly. I don't know. It's warm, like hot. Jesus, can we be in here? I can't imagine we're welcome. We're hippies. We aren't welcome anywhere. We really aren't supposed to be in here. What do? We took off our clothes. We didn't strip naked. We took off our cold coats and socks and pants and draped them over the hot engines. Someone who knows something about trains could probably figure out where we were. We were happy to be there. We were in our wet underwear and nothing else. It could have been a great time to shoot a gay porn scene. Wait just a minute. Did I say somewhere we were 17 years old and then suggest we should have fucked? Is this book now kiddie porn? Oops, now I remember we were both 18. We had some food in our packs and we had our sleeping bags, so we ate and laid the sleeping bags out and slept on top of them as dark, cold, wet Canada flew by us. We didn't know what direction we were going, but we were warm. That train was going fast. I guess it was about midnight. We were far away from Greenfield. We were warm and we fell asleep. We were tired hobos. Bob Dylan never really did it. He never really hopped a train. But I really did. I really hopped a train. Arlo Guthrie never did it, but I really hopped a train. I would never do it again, never. But I was riding someone's father's magic carpet made of steel. Goddamn. You know, I'm sure, thank you. I'm sure Glenn is flabbergasted that it took me that long to mention Bob Dylan. Every interview I've ever do, I talk about Bob Dylan. And I usually say in the preamble to the book that Bob Dylan did not struggle at all. Bob Dylan went to the University of Minnesota. He went and saw Woody Guthrie, and 6 months later, he was a spokesperson for a generation and has been since then, and he's now 83 and still on the road heading for another joint. But when he first got there and had to write a bio, he thought, son of an appliance dealer in Hibbing, Minnesota, who then went 2 semesters to the University of Minnesota and then came to New York, was not very interesting. So he made up this story about hopping trains, hitchhiking, and working with a carnival. I believed it, and I did it. So if you look at Bob Dylan's early stuff, all the stuff he says he didn't do it. I did. Where's my fucking Nobel Prize? But so I just forgot to say that. And now I will take any questions you want, and I guarantee you I will not give you a concise answer.
All right, so I'm going to pass around a mic because we need to be able to have our online viewers.
Yeah, because people in person don't fucking matter. It's just okay, never.
How did your partnership with Teller begin?
How did it begin, you said?
How did your partnership?
Teller and I have an age difference that was very significant at the time and is significant now, but wasn't significant in between. Teller's 7 years older than me. So the whole time I was in high school, Teller was teaching high school, and not different high schools. Not that good a story. And there was another guy named Weir Chrissimer, and Weir Chrissimer had a group in Amherst College. He's between us in age. Called the Otmar Scheck Memorial Society for the Preservation of Unusual and Disgusting Music. And it was a competitor to Bach, which PDQ Bach. And he would use Amherst College alumni and people around to play very odd kinds of classical music parodies, Beethoven Ninth with words about eating and Mr. Ed themed cantata and so on. And I bought a stereo from him when I was 17, and we got to talking, and I said I was a juggler. And he said, could you, if we played a Ram Kachaturian saber dance, could you throw plungers, plumber's helpers, at a slick board, rotate it in the air, and stick them around me as though they were knives? And I said, I can learn anything. I'll do that, sure. And Teller was reciting Latin poetry. that he had written about Otmar Scheck. Teller was a high school Latin teacher and was going to be, incidentally, John Stewart's teacher the next year if he hadn't gone off to work with me. And John Stewart still says if I hadn't taken Teller away, he'd be a Latin scholar today. But so Teller and I were working, I was juggling and throwing plungers, and I also played bass drum while juggling. Did some other juggling stuff in the show. I don't remember it all. And Teller was doing this. We got to talking, and we had the conversation that I alluded to about magic being intellectual. And then when this whole book takes place, as I was hitchhiking around, whenever I got near Jersey, I would stop in and see Teller. He'd take me out to dinner, and we'd talk. And I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask. But it's interesting that most people who work together in show business fall in love. I mean, Lennon and McCartney were in love, Jagger and Richards were in love, and certainly Martin and Lewis were in love. You'd even go back to Gilbert and Sullivan. This real strong affection, and in most cases sexual, but at least a very strong affection. Teller and I never had that. We never felt affection to each other. We just believed that we could do better stuff together than we could separately. And our solo stuff has proven that. So when people ask, which you didn't, how Teller and I have gotten along for 50 years, it's because our relationship never mattered, only the show did. And that's actually really important. It's like if you don't get along with the guy who's fixing the Slurpee machine when you're working at 7-Eleven, it ain't no thing, right? It's nothing. But if your heart gets broken, it's a big thing. So although Teller has developed, we have developed into each other's best friends, I suppose, we don't spend any time together. He was the first to meet my children after the hospital staff and my family. And when our parents died, we were the ones we talked to each other. But we don't socialize much because we work together and have worked together 60 hours a week for 50 years. So, it's like, hey, Teller, what'd you do today? Same thing you did today, asshole. But it turns out, and what may be a sad truth, that respect is maybe stronger than love. Because when Teller and I don't get along, we just don't care. All we've ever cared about is the show. And when Teller and I started working together, the important stuff is all there. Neither one of us is ever late. Neither one of us does drugs or drinks. And we do what we say we're going to do. So putting my life, which I do, actually into Teller's hands, it's not a big deal. He never makes a mistake. There another question I can answer with 4 other questions I had myself?
Would you talk about the red nail polish on your left hand?
When I started juggling, when I was a teenager, my mom, who was always trying to get me to cut my hair, I finally cut it when she was dead. Yeah! When she was trying to get me to cut my hair, and she'd say, you're juggling, and everybody's looking at your hands. They should be really beautiful. And she meant you should wash your hands once in a while. But I, in order to mock her, took some of her nail polish and put it on this finger, and then continued to mock her with that forever. And then, I'm a real mama's boy. I was very close to my mom for our whole lives. She had me when she was 45. She died when she was 90. So half of her life and, maybe half of my life were spent together. We talked every day that we were both alive. And I was very close to my dad, too. I don't mean to show any disrespect to that. But so I did that to mock her. And then as I got older and more successful, it turned from mocking to respect. Some people say it's to remember your mom. Well, I don't fucking need nail polish for that. But, when I go on Letterman and stuff, I do this, like Carol Burnett tugging her ear, bullshit stuff, but it meant something to me. And now, Moxie is my no longer teenager. He turned 20. He starts saying that the nail polish is actually for him, and my mom would approve. So let that lie go. So that's all it is. And I just keep doing that. I don't know. I'm 70 years old, for Christ's sake. Grow the fuck up.
Mr. Jillette, thank you for coming and joining this. You mentioned a moment ago about unusual forms of music in Amherst, and I'm wondering if you'd have a comment or something to say about the fact that last Saturday we lost Tom Lehrer. He passed away at the age 97.
I loved Tom Lehrer, and he was, never met him, but a big hero of mine because we sometimes lack smart people in the arts. Sometimes, there's a lot of smart people there. Of course, Monty Python is a good example, and Martin Mull. There's brilliant people for Zappa. But Tom Lehrer was wonderful and witty and sweet. And there was always this thing I believed, which was that Harvard did not approve of him doing the songs. And I found out that that's totally an urban myth. They were totally supportive of him all the way through. And the only reason he stopped was that he got sick of doing the same songs over and over again. He just didn't like showbiz. Of course, you could say, Tom, write some new fucking songs. But yeah, he'll be very missed. He was a big hero of mine. Although not as much, he was comedically, not so much musically, of course, because he just played kind of standard Tin Pan Alley stuff repurposed.
Penn, welcome back to Marin. The Penn and Teller show used to end with the magic bullet trick.
Uh-huh.
What's the real reason you stopped doing the magic bullet trick?
The magic bullet trick, I guess this is simply bragging. A magic bullet trick is a trick where Teller and I get two experts in guns up on stage. We put glass plates in front of us. They took a bullet. They signed the cartridge and the casing. Was loaded into the gun, and it was shot, shattered the glass, and we had it in our teeth. It is considered to be the most dangerous trick ever done because it 13, they break it down like this, it always makes me laugh, 13 magicians and 2 carnies. Apparently there is a lower form of life than magicians. 13 magicians and 2 carnies have died on stage, most famously Chung Ling Soo, who was an American magician who was just in a racist, what was at the time not considered racist, which would now be horribly racist, dressed Chinese and pretend to speak Chinese, shot in the chest on stage and killed. We did that trick, and we did some stuff that was which I thought was very clever. We never claimed to be catching bullets in our teeth. We said, we're going to move this little piece of lead from this side of the stage to that side of the stage, and we have magic wands. There's nothing more strong in magic than a lie that the audience tells themselves. If we said we're going to catch the bullets in our teeth, everybody says bullshit. If we say we're moving it from this side of the stage to the other, the audience says they're going to catch it in their teeth, which is pretty wonderful. It was voted as the best magic trick ever done. England, the big paper over there, did a big survey, and we came in ahead of Houdini, came in ahead of everything, every Copperfield trick and everything. It was a wicked good trick, and we were really proud of it. And the thing we're most proud of is it was not dangerous. And people would ask us all the time, why don't you tell people that people have died doing this and it's dangerous? And my answer was always, if you've come to our show to see us get hurt, fuck you. What art is supposed to be is a celebration of life. So you're supposed to be like on a roller coaster. You're supposed to viscerally feel like something dangerous has happened, but intellectually knowing you're safe. And no one should ever be hurt in show business. As a matter of fact, I will not go to see a show where either someone is in danger or someone claims to be in danger, even if they're lying about it, like Chris Angel, but even if they're lying about it, I don't want to be complicit in a disrespect for human life. So we did the trick, and man, we loved it. And it was not original. It was original method. We worked out how to do it in a safe way with the help of another magician, and Johnny Thompson, several magicians, but the plot of it, the effect of it, is actually a truly American magic trick done by Aboriginal American magicians who would do a bullet catch in their hand with the settlers. How'd that work out for them? Anyway, they would do this, and it's a classic plot in magic that we did a version of that I believe was really good. And then something happened. I don't know exactly how our country became as divided as it did, but it turned out that you couldn't show a gun on stage without making a statement about gun control. We had things to say about gun control. They were not part of that bit. But the audience would not allow a gun to be seen without having some political statement around it. And this was a magic trick that was tied into a magic trick that had gone back almost 300 years. And we wanted it to be a magic trick and did not want it to be political. Some of our stuff does have political elements, but this didn't. So Teller and I just said this was a pure trick, but once we pulled the guns out, we could feel the audience divide and wait for us to choose a side. It was heartbreaking. To answer another question you didn't ask, we had another trick where we burned the American flag. It was burned and restored American flag. It dealt with the subject of freedom of speech, and it was also featured on the West Wing. And some people have said to me, "Oh, it was nice of the West Wing to let you do that trick live." And I say, "Fuck you, Lawrence O'Donnell Jr. I wrote that. You put it on West Wing. You said, 'Oh, it'll be good for you to put it on West Wing,' and then it became a bit that he wrote. It's all my words. Fuck him." He's one of my best friends, by the way, so fuck him. We did a thing where we had the American flag. We talked about the First Amendment. We burned the flag and then restored it in this patriotic moment. And after 9/11, we were doing that trick, and we'd bring the flag out at the beginning, which is before anything's been said about it, and the audience would start cheering. And it wasn't rah, rah, America. And even back then, although nothing like it is now, the American flag had gone from a symbol of freedom to a symbol of one particularly, mentally ill group of people in our country. And it was meaning something else. And it's one of the several things we pulled out of the show because it got too big a reaction. We'd bring the flag out and the audience would cheer and applaud the exact wrong way. And then we do the cut and restored flag, which was burned and restored flag, which was about freedom of speech and real freedom. And it was just raw, raw America. And I remember walking backstage after the show and saying to Teller, boy, that the flag is getting the biggest reaction of anything in the show, man. We got to cut it. It's the wrong reaction. It's just not right. And Teller said, yeah, we'll never do that again. And I suppose if America turns around and has the flag be something intellectual as opposed to something that I'm afraid at sometimes is just there to be divisive, we might do it again, but I doubt it. I think the bullet catch on the flag are two things that, for our consciences, we couldn't really do. If we just came out and said it's every human's right to own a gun and then did the bullet catch, it would be huge in our show. We'd get a different audience and probably make more money. And if we did the flag thing and went rah, rah, America, but those aren't the ideas of that bit. So that's why we don't do the bullet catch. But motherfucker, it was a good trick.
We're going to take one last question back here.
Last question, because we did, 3 questions and I covered, a concise answer? Never. Who's got the question now?
That was the short answer. I'm just wondering, what was your...
By the way, you're the last question, so you're sure it's the best one?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I was just wondering if you could share your most embarrassing moment with us.
It's right now when I'm going to piss myself. I don't know. I might give you an honest answer instead of a snarky one. When Stephen Colbert had his show when he was in character as a character called Colbert, I went on to, pimp some stupid book I'd written. And I've never been able to do irony, and I've never been able to do satire. Allen Ginsberg said, the poet must stand naked on stage. And I never liked satire, and I've never liked irony. I want people to say what they feel. And they can say it funny if they want, or they can say it beautifully if they want. But I get confused when someone says the opposite of what they mean, and I'm supposed to understand that. I want things direct. As a matter of fact, I think that Teller and I, in our career, we've mostly had people laughing at us, not with us. We say stuff that we absolutely mean from the heart, and some people find it funny and laugh at us and pay us, and I guess that's good. But I went on Colbert, and I did not, there's a rule in Carney that, you never play another man's game, ever. And I was on Colbert, and I kind of thought that I could be funny in his style, and I could be a little bit ironic, and I could kind of do an improvisation with him on the show. And I wanted to do a really good job, and I really didn't. I was terrible. And I was out there floundering. And Stephen Colbert, I think to this day, thinks I'm a horrible, talentless hack. Not saying he's wrong, but I just felt awful. I was just embarrassed, and I was flushed, and I tried to talk to him afterwards, and I just couldn't find the pocket, mostly because it's a skill I don't have. And if you look back on the Penn and Teller stuff, and why would you, we don't really do anything sarcastic or ironic. I mean, the flag thing is a perfect example of that. We were really talking about freedom of speech. And so that was it. And boy, what an awful question to end with, because now I just feel like a failure. I feel awful. Someone asked me a
Okay.
happy question. No, go ahead.
All right, let me take one from online as a
Yeah,
last
pick one that'll
question.
make me happy.
Okay. Let's see. That one you kind of answered. Mathematicians are frequently jugglers. How are you at math?
When I was I was an A student in math and algebra in high school, ninth grade, and I was the tallest person that Greenfield High School had ever seen, and I was already tight wire walking, unicycling, and juggling, and they asked me to go out for the basketball team, which I had a certain natural skill at, and Mr. Borgard was the math teacher and the basketball coach, and I went out for basketball that afternoon, and I did some layup shots, and I did very good. And then, I mean, for the first time out, I suppose, I'd played with other children at the time, and then I missed a shot, and the coach came over and he hit me in the arm and said, "What are you doing, Jillette? Get out there!" I said, "Did you just hit me? Did you just hit me?" And he said, "No, I just want you to play better. I don't think you're doing your best." And I said, "Fuck you." And he said, "You don't talk to me like that." And I said, "It's my own time. This is after school. I don't get hit by anybody. I don't like it. I'm never going to come back again." And he said, "You owe it to your school to play basketball because you're really, really good." And I said, "Fuck you and fuck the school. And by the way, I'm willing to press charges about you hitting me. I do not like to be hit. I do not believe people should hit other people. I'm out of here." And then I aced the rest of the math test for that year and got a D.
All right.
Got a D.
Well, there
So
we
I'll never find out how good I was at math. But you're speaking about Ron Graham, who was at Bell Labs, who was a friend of mine. He's one of the best mathematicians ever, and also a good juggler, not as good as he thought he was.
Okay. Well,
That's a
thank
happier
you
answer,
so
isn't it?
much. This was such a fun event. Thank you so much, Penn. We loved it. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to our online audience. We're